Section 10 of Psychology of the Unconscious by Carl Jung. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Section 10. It is easy to understand the maiden as a symbol of the libido used in the sense of causative comparison. The snake in paradise is usually considered as feminine, as the seductive principle in woman, and is represented as feminine by the old artists, although properly the snake has a phallic meaning. Through a similar change of meaning, the snake in antiquity becomes the symbol of the earth, which on its side is always considered feminine. The bull is the well-known symbol for the fruitfulness of the sun. The bull gods in the Mithraic liturgy were called guardians of the axis of the earth, by whom the axle of the orb of the heavens was turned. The divine man Mithra also had the same attributes. He is sometimes called the Sol Invictus itself, sometimes the mighty companion and ruler of Helios. He holds in his right hand the Bear constellation, which moves and turns the heavens. The bull-headed gods, equally the Greek counterpart with Mithra himself, to whom the attribute young one, the newcomer, is given, are merely attributive components of the same divinity. The chief god of the Mithraic liturgy is himself subdivided into Mithra and Helios. The attributes of each of these are closely related to the other. Of Helios it is said, "You will see the god youthful, graceful, with glowing locks, in a white garment, and a scarlet cloak, with a fiery helmet." Of Mithra it is said, "You will see a god very powerful, with a shining countenance, young, with golden hair, clothed in white vestments, with a golden crown, holding in his right hand a bullock's golden shoulder, that is the Bear constellation, which, wandering hourly up and down, moves and turns the heavens. And out of his eyes you will see lightning spring forth, and from his body stars." If we place fire and gold as essentially similar, then a great accord is found in the attributes of the two gods. To these mystical pagan ideas there deserve to be added the probably almost contemporaneous vision of Revelation. In being turned, I saw 7 golden candlesticks, and in the midst of the candlesticks one like unto the Son of Man, clothed with a garment down to the foot, and girt about at the breasts with a golden girdle. And his head and his hair were white as white wool, white as snow, and his eyes were as a flame of fire, and his feet like unto burnished brass, as if it had been refined in a furnace, and his voice as the sound of many waters. And he had in his right hand 7 stars, and out of his mouth proceeded a sharp 2-edged sword, and his countenance was as the sun shineth in his strength. Revelation 1:12 following lines. And I looked and beheld a white cloud, and upon the cloud I saw one sitting like unto the Son of Man, having on his head a golden crown, and in his hand a sharp sickle. Revelations 14:14. And his eyes were as a flame of fire, and upon his head were many diadems, and he was arrayed in a garment sprinkled with blood. And the armies which were in heaven followed him upon white horses, clothed in fine linen, white and pure, and out of his mouth proceeded a sharp sword. Revelation 19:12-15. One need not assume that there is a direct dependency between the Apocalypse and the Mithraic liturgy. The visionary images of both texts are developed from a source, not limited to one place, but found in the soul of many diverse people, because the symbols which arise from it are too typical for it to belong to one individual only. I put these images here to show how the primitive symbolism of light gradually developed, with the increasing depth of the vision, into the idea of the sun hero, the well-beloved. The development of the symbol of light is thoroughly typical. In addition to this, perhaps I might call to mind the fact that I have previously pointed out this course with numerous examples, and therefore I can spare myself the trouble of returning to this subject. These visionary occurrences are the psychological roots of the sun coronations in the mysteries. Its rite is religious hallucination congealed into liturgical form, which, on account of its great regularity, could become a generally accepted outer form. After all this, it is easily understood how the ancient Christian Church, on one side, stood in an especial bond to Christ, as sole novus, and on the other side had a certain difficulty in freeing itself from the earthly symbols of Christ. Indeed, Philo of Alexandria saw in the Son the image of the divine Logos, or of the Deity especially. De Somniis 185. In an Ambrosian hymn, Christ is invoked by O Sol Salutis, and so on. At the time of Marcus Aurelius, Melancthon, in his work called Christ the Helios, the rising sun, the only sun rising from heaven. Still more important is a passage from Pseudo Cyprian. Oh, how remarkable a providence that Christ should be born on the same day on which the sun moves onward, the Cal of April the 4th holiday. And for this reason the prophet Malachi spoke to the people concerning Christ. Unto you shall the Son of Righteousness arise, with healing in his wings. This is the Son of Righteousness, in whose wings healing shall be displayed. In a work nominally attributed to John Chrysostomus, De Solstitiis et Equinoctiis, occurs this passage. Moreover, the Lord is born in the month of December in the winter, on the 8th Cal of January, when the ripe olives are gathered, so that the oil, that is the chrism, may be produced. Moreover, they call it the birthday of the unconquered one, who in any case is as unconquered as our Lord, who conquered death itself. Or why should they call it the birthday of the Son? He himself is the Son of Righteousness, concerning whom Malachi the prophet spoke. The Lord is the author of light and of darkness. He is the judge spoken of by the prophet as the Son of Righteousness. According to the testimony of Eusebius of Alexandria, the Christians also shared in the worship of the rising sun, which lasted into the 5th century. Woe to the worshippers of the sun and the moon and the stars! For I know many worshippers and prayer sayers to the sun. For now, at the rising of the sun, they worship and say, Have mercy on us. And not only the sun Gnostics and the heretics do this, but also Christians who leave their faith and mix with the heretics. Augustine preached emphatically to the Christians, known as Dominus, Sol factus sed per quem sol factus est, ne quis carnalita sapiens solum istum Christum intelligendum putaret. Art has preserved much of the remnants of sun worship, thus the nimbus around the head of Christ, and the halo of the saints in general. The Christian legends also attribute many fire and light symbols to the saints. The 12 apostles, for example, are likened to the 12 signs of the zodiac, and are represented therefore with a star over the head. It is not to be wondered at that the heathen, as Tertullian avows, considered the sun as the Christian God. Among the Manichaeans, God was really the sun. One of the most remarkable works extant, where the pagan, Asiatic, Hellenic, and Christian intermingle, is the text edited by Worth. This is a book of fables, but nevertheless a mine for near Christian fantasies, which gives a profound insight into Christian symbolism. In this is found the following magical dedication: To Zeus, the great sun god, the king, the Saviour. In certain parts of Armenia, the rising sun is still worshipped by Christians, that it may let its foot rest upon the faces of the worshippers. The foot occurs as an anthropomorphic attribute, and we have already met the theriomorphic attribute in the feathers and the sun phallus. Other comparisons of the sun's ray, as knife, sword, arrow, and so on, have also, as we have learned from the psychology of the dream, a phallic meaning at bottom. This meaning is attached to the foot, as I here point out, and also to the feathers or hair of the sun, which signify the power or strength of the sun. I refer to the story of Samson, and to that of the Apocalypse of Baruch, concerning the phoenix bird, which, flying before the sun, loses its feathers, and, exhausted, is strengthened again in an ocean bath at evening. Under the symbol of moth and sun we have dug down into the historic depths of the soul, and in doing this we have uncovered an old buried idol, the youthful, beautiful, fire-encircled, and halo-crowned sun-hero, who, forever unattainable to the mortal, wanders upon the earth, causing night to follow day, winter, summer, death, life, and who returns again in rejuvenated splendor and gives light to new generations. The longing of the dreamer, concealed behind the moth, stands for him. The ancient pre-Asiatic civilizations were acquainted with a sun worship, having the idea of a god dying and rising again: Osiris, Tammuz, Attis Adonis, Christ, Mithra and his bull, Phoenix, and so on. The beneficent power, as well as the destroying power, was worshipped in fire. The forces of nature always have two sides, as we have already seen in the God of Job. This reciprocal bond brings us back once more to Miss Miller's poem. Her reminiscences support our previous supposition that the symbol of moth and sun is a condensation of two ideas, about one of which we have just spoken. The other is the moth and the flame. As the title of a play, about the contents of which the author tells us absolutely nothing, Moth and Flame may easily have the well-known erotic meaning of flying around the flame of passion until one's wings are burned. The passionate longing, that is to say the libido, has its two sides. It is power which beautifies everything, and which under other circumstances destroys everything. It often appears as if one could not accurately understand in what the destroying quality of the creative power consists. A woman who gives herself up to passion, particularly under the present-day condition of culture, experiences the destructive side only too soon. One has only to imagine one's self a little away from the everyday moral conditions in order to understand what feelings of extreme insecurity overwhelm the individual who gives himself unconditionally over to fate. To be fruitful means indeed to destroy oneself, because with the rise of the succeeding generation the previous one has passed beyond its highest point. Thus our descendants are our most dangerous enemies, whom we cannot overcome, for they will outlive us, and therefore without fail will take the power from our enfeebled hands. The anxiety in the face of the erotic fate is wholly understandable, for there is something immeasurable therein. Fate usually hides unknown dangers, and the perpetual hesitation of the neurotic to venture upon life is easily explained by his desire to be allowed to stand still, so as not to take part in the dangerous battle of life. Whoever renounces the chance to experience must stifle in himself the wish for it, and therefore commits a sort of self-murder. From this the death fantasies which readily accompany the renunciation of the erotic wish are made clear. In the poem Miss Miller has voiced these fantasies. She adds further to the material with the following: I had been reading a selection from one of Byron's poems, which pleased me very much, and made a deep and lasting impression. Moreover, the rhythm of my last two verses, for I, the source, etc., and the two lines of Byron's are very similar. Now let me die, as I have lived in faith, nor tremble though the universe should quake. This reminiscence with which the series of ideas is closed confirms the death fantasies which follow from renunciation of the erotic wish. The quotation comes, which Miss Miller did not mention, from an uncompleted poem of Byron's called Heaven and Earth. The whole verse follows: Still blessed be the Lord, for what is past, for that which is, for all are his, from first to last. Time, space, eternity, life, death, the vast known and immeasurable unknown, he made and can unmake. And shall I, for a little gasp of breath, blaspheme and groan? No, let me die, as I have lived in faith, nor quiver though the universe may quake. The words are included in a kind of praise or prayer spoken by a mortal who is in hopeless flight before the mounting deluge. Miss Miller puts herself in the same situation in her quotation, that is to say, she readily lets it be seen that her feeling is similar to the despondency of the unhappy ones who find themselves hard pressed by the threatening mounting waters of the deluge. With this the writer allows us a deep look into the dark abyss of her longing for the sun hero. We see that her longing is in vain. She is immortal only for a short time, borne upwards into the light by means of the highest longing, and then sinking to death, or much more, urged upwards by the fear of death, like the people before the deluge, and in spite of the desperate conflict, irretrievably given over to destruction. This is a mood which recalls vividly the closing scene in Cyrano de Bergerac. Cyrano, ô mais, puisqu'elle est en chemin, je l'attendrai debout, et l'épée à la main. Que dites-vous? C'est inutile, je le sais, mais on ne se bat pas dans l'espoir du succès. Non, non, c'est bien plus beau lorsque c'est inutile. Je sais bien qu'à la fin vous me mettrez à part. We already know sufficiently well what longing and what impulse it is that attempts to clear a way for itself to the light, but that it may be realized quite clearly and irrevocably, it is shown plainly in the quotation, "No, let me die," which confirms and completes all earlier remarks. The divine, the much beloved, who is honored in the image of the sun, is also the goal of the longing of our poet. Byron's Heaven and Earth is a mystery founded on the following passage from Genesis chapter 6:2, and it came to pass that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all that they chose. Byron offers as a further motif for his poem the following passage from Coleridge, and woman wailing for her demon lover. Byron's poem is concerned with two great events, one psychologic and one telluric, the passion which throws down all barriers and all the terrors of the unchained powers of nature, a parallel which has already been introduced into our earlier discussion. The angels, Samyasa and Azazel, burn with sinful love for the beautiful daughters of Cain, Anna and Alabama, and force a way through the barrier which is placed between mortal and immortal. They revolt, as Lucifer once did, against God, and the archangel Raphael raises his voice warningly. But man hath listened to his voice, and ye to woman's. Beautiful she is, the serpent's voice less subtle than her kiss. The snake but vanquished dust, but she will draw a second host from heaven to break heaven's law. The power of God is threatened by the seduction of passion. A second fall of angels menaces heaven. Let us translate this mythologic projection back into the psychologic from whence it originated. Then it would read, the power of the good and reasonable ruling the world wisely is threatened by the chaotic primitive power of passion. Therefore passion must be exterminated, that is to say, projected into mythology. The race of Cain and the whole sinful world must be destroyed from the roots by the deluge. It is the inevitable result of that sinful passion which has broken through all barriers. Its counterpart is the sea, and the waters of the deep, and the floods of rain, the generating, fructifying, and maternal waters, as the Indian mythology refers to them. Now they leave their natural bounds, and surge over the mountain tops, engulfing all living things, for passion destroys itself. The libido is God and devil. With the destruction of the sinfulness of the libido, an essential portion of the libido would be destroyed. Through the loss of the devil, God himself suffered a considerable loss, somewhat like an amputation upon the body of the divinity. The mysterious hint in Raphael's lament concerning the two rebels, Samyasa and Azazel, suggests this. Why cannot this earth be made or be destroyed without involving ever some vast void in the immortal ranks? Love raises man not only above himself, but also above the bounds of his mortality and earthliness up to divinity itself, and in the very act of raising him, it destroys him. Mythologically, this self-presumption finds its striking expression in the building of the heaven-high Tower of Babel, which brings confusion to mankind. In Byron's poem it is the sinful ambition of the race of Cain, for love of which it makes even the stars subservient, and leads away the sons of God themselves. If indeed longing for the highest things, if I may speak so, is legitimate, then it lies in the circumstances that it leaves its human boundaries, that of sinfulness, and therefore destruction. The longing of the moth for the star is not absolutely pure and transparent, but glows in sultry mist, for man continues to be man. Through the excess of his longing he draws down the divine into the corruption of his passion. Therefore he seems to raise himself to the divine, but with that his humanity is destroyed. Thus the love of Anna and Aholibama for their angels becomes the ruin of gods and men. The invocation with which Cain's daughters implore their angels is psychologically an exact parallel to Miss Miller's poem. Anna. Seraph, from thy sphere, whatever star contains thy glory. In the eternal depths of heaven, albeit thou watchest with the seven, though through space infinite and hoary, before thy bright wings worlds will be driven. Yet here, O think of her who holds thee dear, and though she nothing is to thee, yet think that thou art all to her. Eternity is in thy years, unborn, undying beauty in thine eyes. With me thou canst not sympathize, except in love, and there thou must acknowledge that more loving dust ne'er wept beneath the skies. Thou walkest by many worlds, thou seest the face of him who made thee great, as he hath made of me the least of those cast out from Eden's gate. Yet, Seraph dear, O hear, for thou hast loved me, and I would not die until I know what I must die in knowing, that thou forgettest in thine eternity her whose heart death could not keep from o'erflowing. For thee, immortal essence as thou art, great is their love who love in sin and fear, and such I feel are waging in my heart a war unworthy to an Adamite. Forgive, my Seraph, that such thoughts appear, for sorrow is our element. The hour is near, which tells me we are not abandoned quite. Appear, appear, Seraph, my own Azazel, be but here, and leave the stars to their own light. Aholibama, I call thee, I wait thee, and I love thee, though I be formed of clay, and thou of beams, more bright than those of day on Eden's streams. Thine immortality cannot repay with love more warm than mine, my love. There is a ray in me, which, though forbidden yet to shine, I feel was lighted at thy gods and mine. It may be hidden long, death and decay our mother Eve bequeathed us, but my heart defies it. Though this life must pass away, is that a cause for thee and me to part? I can share all things, even immortal sorrow, for thou hast ventured to share life with me, and shall I shrink from thine eternity? No, though the serpent's sting should pierce me through, and thou thyself wert like the serpent, coil around me still, and I will smile and curse thee not, but hold thee in as warm a fold as but descend and prove a mortal's love for an immortal. The apparition of both angels which follows the invocation is, as always, a shining vision of light. Aholibama, the clouds from off their pinions flinging, as though they bore tomorrow's light. Anna, but if our father see the sight. Aholibama, he would but deem it was the moon, rising unto some sorcerer's tune, an hour too soon. Anna, lo, they have kindled all the west, like a returning sunset, on Ararat's late secret crest, a wild and many-colored bow, the remnant of their flashing path, now shines. At the sight of this many-colored vision of light, where both women are entirely filled with desire and expectation, Anna makes use of a simile full of presentiment, which suddenly allows us to look down once more into the dismal dark depths, out of which for a moment the terrible animal nature of the mild god of light emerges. And now behold, it hath returned to night as rippling foam, which the Leviathan hath lashed from his unfathomable home. when sporting on the face of the calm deep, subsides soon after he again hath dashed down to where the ocean's fountains sleep. Thus, like the Leviathan, we recall this overpowering weight in the scale of God's justice in regard to the man Job. There, where the deep sources of the ocean are, the Leviathan lives. From there the all-destroying flood ascends, the all-engulfing flood of animal passion, that stifling, compressing feeling of the onward surging impulse is projected mythologically as a flood, which, rising up and over all, destroys all that exists, in order to allow a new and better creation to come forth from this destruction. Japhet. The eternal will shall deign to expound this dream of good and evil, and redeem unto himself all times, all things, and gathered under his almighty wings, abolish hell, and to the expiated earth restore the beauty of her birth. Spirits. And when shall take effect this wondrous spell? Japhet. When the Redeemer cometh, first in pain, and then in glory. Spirits. New times, new climes, new arts, new men, but still the same old tears, old crimes, and oldest ill shall be amongst your race in different forms, but the same mortal storms shall oversweep the future as the waves in a few hours, the glorious giants' graves. The prophetic visions of Japhet have almost prophetic meaning for our poetess. With the death of the moth in the light, evil is once more laid aside. The complex has once again, even if in a censored form, expressed itself. With that, however, the problem is not solved. All sorrow and every longing begins again from the beginning, but there is promise in the air, the premonition of the Redeemer, of the well-beloved, of the sun hero, who again mounts to the height of the sun, and again descends to the coldness of the winter, who is the light of hope from race to race, the image of the libido. End of section 10.